I thought she was asleep when I walked into the hospital room that night. The machines were humming softly, and the hallway outside was quiet except for the squeak of a nurse's shoes. Her eyes were closed, her breathing slow and uneven. I almost turned around and left. Then, just as I reached the door, she whispered, "Stay, just until the sun comes up." I froze, because that was the moment I realized this wasn't just about sitting in a chair beside a hospital bed. It was about showing up when someone needed you most, even if you barely knew them. Before we begin, if stories like this touch your heart, make sure to subscribe to your channel name, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us keep sharing powerful stories about kindness and hope. Now, let me tell you what happened that night. It was late October in Chicago, the kind of night where the cold air bites at your face and the wind rattles the windows. I had just finished a 12-hour shift driving for a rideshare app. I was tired, hungry, and ready to go home to my tiny apartment and collapse on the couch. That's when the request popped up on my phone. Pickup location, a small brick house on the west side. Destination, Mercy General Hospital. I almost declined it. Hospitals at night usually meant trouble, panic, tears, or silence so heavy you could feel it in the back seat. But something made me accept. When I pulled up, the porch light flickered. After a moment, the front door opened. A young woman stepped out slowly. She looked to be in her early 30s, wearing an oversized gray sweater and jeans. Her dark hair was pulled back into a messy bun. She moved carefully, one hand pressed against her side. I jumped out of the car. "Are you okay?" I asked. She gave a small smile. "I think so. I just need to get to the hospital." Her name was Elena. The drive was quiet at first. The streetlights cast soft yellow lines across her face. She kept looking out the window, breathing slowly, like she was trying to stay calm. "Do you have someone meeting you there?" I finally asked. She shook her head. "No, it's just me." That answer hit me harder than I expected. When we arrived, I parked near the emergency entrance. I could have dropped her off and left. That's what most drivers would have done. But she struggled a little as she opened the door. "I can walk you in," I heard myself say. She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." Inside, the hospital smelled like disinfectant and coffee. A nurse handed Elena a clipboard. I stayed by her side while she filled out forms, her handwriting shaky. After a few minutes, they called her name and wheeled her through double doors. She looked back at me once before disappearing down the hallway. I don't know why I didn't leave. Maybe it was the way she said she had no one. Maybe it was the emptiness in her eyes. Or maybe it was because I remembered what it felt like to sit alone in a hospital waiting room when my dad had his heart attack years ago. So I sat down. An hour passed, then two, around 3 a.m., a doctor stepped into the waiting area. "Are you here with Elena Martinez?" I stood up surprised. "Yes." He gave me a tired smile. "She's stable. It looks like complications from a recent surgery. We're keeping her overnight for observation." Relief washed over me even though I barely knew her. "Can I see her?" I asked. He nodded. "Just for a few minutes." The room was dim, lit only by the glow of monitors. Elena lay still under a thin hospital blanket. Her face looked pale against the white pillow. I thought she was asleep. I pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down quietly. "I told you that you didn't have to stay," she murmured without opening her eyes. I jumped a little. "I know." There was a pause. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the silence. "Most people don't," she said softly. "Stay, I mean." I didn't know what to say to that. She opened her eyes slowly. They were tired but warm. My mom used to sit with me when I was sick, all night sometimes. She'd say, "No one should feel alone in the dark." Her voice cracked. She passed away last year. I felt my chest tighten. "I'm sorry," she nodded slightly. "I've been trying to be strong since then. But tonight, I was scared." The honesty in her voice was raw, real. "I'm glad you called a ride," I said gently. She gave a faint laugh. "Me too." Minutes passed quietly. I checked the time. It was almost 4 a.m. My eyes burned from exhaustion. I had work again in a few hours. "You can go," she whispered. "I'll be okay." I stood up, thinking that was my cue. I reached for my jacket. That's when she said it. "Stay, just until the sun comes up." Her eyes searched mine, not demanding, just hopeful. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't about convenience. It wasn't about gas money or sleep or tomorrow's schedule. It was about a human being asking another human being not to leave them alone in the dark. So I sat back down. We talked quietly through the night. She told me about her job as an elementary school teacher, about how her students made her laugh every day, about how her mom used to bake apple pie from scratch every Sunday. I told her about my dad, about how scared I'd been sitting in that waiting room years ago, wishing someone would just say, "You're not alone." Somewhere between stories and silence, the fear in the room faded. At 6:15 a.m., the first light of morning began to glow through the thin hospital curtains. The sky shifted from black to deep blue to soft pink. Elena watched it with a small smile. "You stayed," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "I did. Thank you." It was such a simple phrase, but it felt heavy with meaning. A nurse came in to check her vitals. Visiting hours were ending for the night. I stood up again, this time knowing it was really time to go. At the door, I turned back. "Do you have someone I can call? A friend? A coworker?" She hesitated. "There's a neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez. She's kind." "Good," I said. "Let her be there for you." She nodded. I left the hospital just as the sun broke over the city. The cold air hit my face, but it felt different now. Lighter. I drove home exhausted, but strangely full. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I wondered how she was doing, if she had someone sitting beside her again. A week later, I received a message through the rideshare app. It was from Elena. "Hi," it read. "I'm home and recovering. I wanted to say thank you again. You didn't just drive me to the hospital. You reminded me that kindness still exists." There was a picture attached. It was of her classroom. A group of smiling kids holding up a handmade sign that said, "Thank you for helping our teacher." I stared at it for a long time. Because here's the thing about kindness, it doesn't stop where you think it will. I stayed one night. But that one night gave her strength, and maybe that strength flowed into her classroom, into those kids, into their families. Kindness moves. It spreads in ways we can't always see. A few months later, I got another ride request. When I pulled up, Elena was standing on her porch looking healthier and brighter. She waved. This time, she was heading to a community center downtown. "I started volunteering," she told me during the drive. "There's a program for people who don't have family nearby. We sit with them during medical appointments or hard days." I smiled. "You're staying with them until the sun comes up?" She laughed softly, something like that. As I dropped her off, I realized something powerful. Kindness isn't always dramatic. It's not always big donations or grand gestures. Sometimes it's just a chair pulled close to a hospital bed, a quiet conversation at 4 a.m., a decision to stay when it would be easier to leave. That night taught me that showing up matters more than we think. We live in a world where everyone is rushing, where schedules are packed and phones are always buzzing. It's easy to tell ourselves someone else will help. But what if we are the someone else? What if the smallest act, holding a door, making a call, sitting in silence, becomes the moment that changes someone's entire outlook? I almost drove away that night. If I had, Elena would have faced the dark alone. Instead, I stayed, and the sun still came up. So if you ever find yourself standing at a doorway, wondering whether to step in or walk away, remember this story. Remember that no one should feel alone in the dark, and maybe, just maybe, decide to stay. Because kindness doesn't always require money or perfection or even a plan. Sometimes it only asks for your presence, and when you give it, you might just light the way for someone else until the sun comes up.